welcome to the Skiffy Fanny Show's Reading Rangers.
Alan Moore may know the score, but he needed Eddie Campbell to draw it.
I'm Shaun.
I'm Stephen.
I'm Daniel.
And on today's show, we are discussing the seminal and hugely influential graphic novel, From Hell, by Alan Moore, illustrated by Eddie Campbell. I'm sure he would really appreciate my way of saying From Hell with a little teenage crack in there.
From Hell! Before we get into our discussion, a reminder to our listeners to please share your questions and comments with us at skiffyandfanty.com/listener suggestions. If you aren't already, join us on Twitch for Shaun's Alphabet streams every Friday at 7 p.m. Central to be part of our interactive live streaming show format. Finally, be sure to review and spread the word about our show. Help support us through our Patreon and be part of our Torture Cinema polls, live watches, or other special Patreon-only events on Discord.
Yay! Okay, so Stephen, since this is the book you gave us on a poll, it is your job to tell us why. Why?
What is From Hell about?
You made it a goat sound this time.
I can see we're going to be taking a very sober and thoughtful eye at this important work. From Hell is a graphic novel by acclaimed comics creators Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell, and it is, in the most simple and most nuance-free explanation, a look at the Whitechapel murders attributed to a serial killer called, as we all know, Jack the Ripper, in London, England in 1888. And the story follows the victims, the culprit, and various people drawn into or investigating or otherwise hanging on around the edges of the murders. Now, that's a very, I wanted to say pared down, but then I realized anything we say that involves a knife pun in this episode is going to be a problem. That's okay. From Hell is an examination of a particular conspiracy theory of the Ripper murders, which is that they were conducted at the behest of Queen Victoria herself by her beloved personal surgeon and doctor, Sir William Gull, to silence a blackmail plot of sex workers who were attempting to extort money from various hangers-on of the royal family due to her grandson, Prince Albert Victor, having gotten a young woman pregnant and it having to be covered up. And Dr. Gull, however, has his own motives for going on this killing spree. He is, in fact, in the midst of what appears to be becoming a full-blown serial killer, and his obsession with the secret society of Freemasons dovetails with his need for a purpose, his belief that God has a special plan for him, and that achieving that goal requires horribly mutilating a bunch of women who have not actually done anything wrong, and all the people who around him who try to figure out what the heck is happening. That's a slightly less simplified explanation. There's a lot to this book.
But more accurate, yes.
I mean, it's almost
It's
600
also very
pages.
Yes, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's very embedded in history.
Yes.
And it very much expands on the history of the confluence of historical events that are happening in London at the time, and takes almost like a metaphysical view of all of that, and also connects that to things like architecture and the layout of the city of London and symbolic views that intersect with Gull's views. So it's really a smorgasbord of a lot of different elements. It's quite amazing.
Yes. You can really see Alan Moore's personal obsessions all over this work. I mean, as you would expect. Mm. But, the importance of synchronicity, of historical parallels, of the emotional and spiritual and cultural resonance of significant events and how they echo through time and how those are reflected in both the physical and the psychic environment. An interest in magic, an interest in the patriarchy and how it affects women, an interest in what powerful men do to maintain the patriarchy. That's all very Moore. And those are the things we see unfolding throughout From Hell as, he delves into what is essentially a sordid little conspiracy theory. Like, it struck me as very, I don't know if ironic is the right word, fascinating that at not too dissimilar points in time, you had these two works of conspiracy theory and how they both inspired different creators. There's a From Hell is inspired by this Freemasonry royal baby cover-up conspiracy theory, first promulgated by a man named Stephen Knight, who Moore discusses extensively in his very dense and detailed appendices to From Hell. He goes into a lot of detail about his sources, and he freely admits this story is probably a crock. There is no reason to believe it happened that way. There is very little evidence. It's all a morass of clues and theories and little bits of information that people have tried to make stick together. But that's what fascinated Moore about it. So on the one hand, you have From Hell, this frankly great work based upon this sordid little conspiracy theory. And on the other hand, there was another book, and tell me if you've heard of this one, called Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, which was very popular in the 80s and in the conspiracy chic era of the 90s. And that is probably best remembered today for being a fairly direct and obvious inspiration for Dan Brown and the DaVinci Code. So, you can take these sort of little conspiracy theories that are promulgated by guys who are probably either cranks or looking to make a quick buck or both, and you can make art or you can make a different kind of art that appeals in different ways. I just thought that was cool.
Yeah, two very different directions. That they're windows onto something bigger. And I find it kind of interesting that in that way you have a confluence of things too, right? Synchronicity of things that's very similar to what Moore is dealing with here, where he takes funny little random things in history and shows how they influence events in the story of the Whitechapel murders and the lives of those involved in it, which is somewhat parallel to how this work by Knight ends up influencing Moore as being a doorway into him entering into this historical study and really doing incredibly in-depth research into all aspects of the time and place and personages involved in what's going on here.
Yeah. This is some deep cuts as, but again, pardon the pun. Alan Moore and the depth he takes in his work lends itself to that, right? I mean, Jess Nevins, I first became aware of Jess Nevins, the comics and pulp historian, via his work on Usenet, to date myself. On Usenet, Jess ran a thread monthly that tried to figure out all the references in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which took, believe you me, a lot of doing. And I participated in those threads, as did dozens of other people. And we essentially crowdsourced trying to figure out everything Alan Moore was referencing. It was fantastic. And that was the basis of Jess's first book about League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which he compiled and quite credited and thanked all of us who had contributed, which I thought was a lovely gesture. But the point is, when you dig into Alan Moore, there's going to be a lot of digging because he does his homework and he likes to show you his homework.
Yep.
He likes to show you that he's done his work. And that is probably, and I must say, that is probably one of the few weaknesses of this otherwise remarkable book, is that there is a lot of it. And I'm not 100% sure that all of it is strictly necessary. We maybe could have done without some of those historical cameos. Did we really need to have that little joke about William Butler Yeats? Which I needed to read the appendices, the footnotes, to understand.
To appreciate, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so...
And all of the sort of asides, the
Yes.
philosophical asides that it takes, etc. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a question going back to what we talked about in terms of, or what you mentioned, Stephen, that he accepts that the Knight version of things is a total crock, this conspiracy theory. So I can understand how that could still be an inspiration to explore this in the form of his art of graphic novels, but why choose to then still stick to that plot that Knight had? Why tell this story using those same touchstones, and sort of exploring everything from that version of events? Because he definitely does put into some of the characters, will say, like, there's no record of this being what they said or what they did, but based on other things that I've read about them, this is my fictionalized version that makes sense to me. So why not the story overall be something more similar to what would make sense to him? Is it because you'd be completely clueless who the killer is? You'd be completely clueless of who to focus on? Or
So there is... Yeah, it's interesting. And I think that there are two reasons. And one is one that Moore himself touches on repeatedly over the course of From Hell. And that's the way that the study of an attempt to solve the Ripper murders accrues detail without accruing meaning. It just picks up more and more detail. There are more and more theories, and it gets bigger and more convoluted, and you have this thread over here, and you have this thread over here, and can they be pulled together? Can they not? It is essentially a perfect example of what the great science fiction author Malcolm Older calls narrative disorder, right? Our need to make a story out of things. And ironically, in needing to demonstrate the pitfalls of trying to make a story out of things, Moore needed to make a story out of things to illustrate that. So I think that's part of it. I think that's it's an illustration of imposing the need to make meaning on a fundamentally unknowable event, and the disadvantages that come with trying to do that. But I think there's more. Moore makes it clear, again, at several points throughout the book, in the Detective Fred Aberlin's reaction after the fifth and final murder, in the extremely disturbing interlude involving the conception of Adolf Hitler, in his appendix, that he sees the Ripper murders as an inflection point. It is the point when the Victorian era, even though it would dawdle on for a little bit after that, that's when the Victorian era died. And that's when the 20th century was born. And going with Knight's theory, pulls together all the most Victorian elements in the most satisfying way, so that those elements can all be part of the mosaic. Like the decadence and moral failure of the royal family, the indifference and of the aristocracy, who are wrapped up in their own privilege or their little secret society games, while unimaginable human suffering goes on the part of the poor around them. The tensions between immigrants and people who are less recent immigrants, or who are, born in England or London. All these elements of Victorian England, Victorian society, the difference between public protestations of morality and the hedonistic behavior lying beneath it, the oppression of women. Knight's hypothesis just really brings those things to the fore in a way that a lot of the other Ripper theories, including a lot of the ones that are more plausible, don't do.
Don't have. It also has a mystical element to it, I guess, that is appealing, that it makes it part of I don't know if design is the right word to use, but an inevitable kind of nature, that it's a progression of history and of sort of a cosmic progression of this turning of ages. And a changing over of empires, right? Britain is going to be on the decline. Others are going to be on the rise. Exactly. And there's this very preordained kind of prophetic voice that rings throughout it that very much aligns with the King conspiracy type theory, linking it to the Freemasons and to the magical mystical kind of ideas, I guess, that works very well for more to explore all of those themes.
The old world is dying, the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters.
Right.
Yeah. Very much so. And yes, and it's very interested also. You mentioned architecture, Daniel, and the buildings and the way their connection to Freemasonry, theorized connection to Freemasonry, and
the obelisks,
and the obelisks and the sacred designs. And, again, this is the theory that really lets that stuff get free reign and lets London as a place really be important to the story, which worked to the strengths.
It's a character unto itself.
London's a character unto itself. The buildings of London are minor characters, and the city is a major character, and the neighborhoods are characters. Yeah, it's terrific. And also I think that was important in terms of letting Eddie Campbell's work as the artist do its job, because Campbell, he does some really interesting things here, and it's kind of hidden. I do want to talk about the art for a minute. Sure. Eddie Campbell does something fantastic here, and he does it with art that looks, for the most part, very scratchy. It's very there's a lot of loose, scratchy inks, although he captures features and details extremely keenly when he wants to. Now, Eddie Campbell first became known for, there we go. Yeah, exactly. Look at that detail. Look at it. But when he's showing figures, especially figures in motion, there's a lot of those blacks used as filling to fill things in, and faces are made up of a few scratches to make the key shapes, but it works. You recognize them. Campbell came to prominence through two works. One, which was sometimes called Bacchus and sometimes called Dead Face, which was about a few holdout Greek gods surviving in the modern world, making their way and having kind of down on their luck adventures. And the other was a not autobiographical, but autobiographically inflected series called Alec, which was essentially just a series of extremely keenly observed slice of life stories about ordinary people in working class Britain. And it is that eye for detail and his commitment to using seemingly simple techniques that really grounds this, let's face it, extremely complicated and very weird story, and makes it work as a cohesive whole. The entire book, hundreds of pages, and it's mainly in a 9-panel grid or variants thereof. You'll get a wider panel sometimes, or one that takes up more of the page, but it's all proportioned on that 9-panel grid, 3, 3, 3, which again, like for all I know, he was doing his own sacred geometry in there.
Yes.
But his attention to detail, because those are incredibly well researched backgrounds and visuals, and his naturalistic eye and his ability to filter that naturalistic eye through these expressive loose lines really grounds the story, and it makes the characters clear and distinct, and it makes the action, which involves a lot of quotidian stuff interspersed with shocking moments of violence, really effective.
I agree with most of what you said, and I would add that I thought he really effectively, with those lines, how he drew the ink, he very effectively conveyed different emotions.
Yes.
Through that, and was able to really reach a remarkable range. I don't know if it's something to do with my brain or how I interpret images. I actually found it extremely difficult to realize who characters were. I very clearly got emotions and general feelings from the images, but from just looking at the images, and there are a series of panels sometimes where it's just the image happening, I had it, again, it might be my interpretation, maybe why I always struggled with graphic novels and comics way more than written word. I struggle with figuring out what that image is supposed to be conveying to me, particularly in terms of like a plot. And so there were times where I wasn't sure who characters were. I would get the emotions. And for those, I ended up having to turn back to the appendices to read a description of what it is I'm looking at, to be then able to turn back to it. So in some ways I felt frustrated with that, but at the same time I felt this gratitude that those appendices were there for those explanations to kind of as a crutch to help me. I also don't know if that's maybe just my inexperience with, I don't have the familiarity of looking at images and trying to get a story from images. But I
don't think it's entirely your unfamiliarity. That this artistic style is, I would agree that it is. I would not like start somebody who's just getting into graphic novels with, I mean, the content alone, I probably wouldn't start them there, but like the artistic style, I think is, to me, it comes across as almost immediately feels blurred, chaotic, rough, unfinished, and I don't mean that as an insult. That's just how it is. And it took me a minute to kind of figure out, well, why this stylistic design? until we started to get some of the like really well drawn, like deliberately clean images, frequently of city elements like spires and churches and so on. And that's when I realized, no, this is all deliberate. This isn't it's just his style, although it may very well be his style. He's capable of other forms of artistic expression here. He can give us, effectively architectural drawings. But these other scenes, to me, they came across as the story was progressing as these scenes are often less distinct in terms of their sort of perfection of the lines, etc. In part because what's happening in all of the narrative elements is less pure and directly presented to us in terms of its narrative coherence, as when we have Gull, for example, going on this endlessly long conspiratorial, philosophical, religious rant, esoteric magic rant, while he's taking us on a tour of the city, which by comparison is much more coherent at that particular moment. So there is, I don't know that I've quite figured it all out, but I think there's a tension being put between those two presentations that I think is really important. And yeah, that's an area where I would spend more time. So what I would say then to Daniel is, I don't think you're wrong for finding this difficult. I think if we were just reading your classic Marvel comic book, you would not struggle with that, because I think that visually that would make more sense. Whereas this almost feels impressionistic, or impressionism is not quite the right word for the artistic style, but that's the word I know, so I'm using it. That's what it feels like to me, which is why when you said that this idea that you can kind of get the sense of the emotion from them, but not necessarily feel confident in who the characters are in that moment, I immediately thought, well, that's because it's the impressionism element of it.
Yeah, I think you're both onto something, I believe. I mean, firstly, this is not an entry-level graphic novel, and reading sequential art is something you need to learn. It's not always intuitive. This one is not intuitive in many ways. It's a challenge. And there's also Campbell's style, which does tend towards, that approach that you were identifying, Shaun. And also, there are some deliberate games being played with identity. There is a key point that unfolds through the end of the book that turns on a question of identity, which I don't know if I should spoil, because it is really quite important, but it's deliberate.
Yeah.
And of course, the fact is, this is about an unknowable mystery as well.
Yes.
So there is deliberate confusion being sown over and above the question of identity. In Dance of the Gullcatchers, the comics form appendix after the appendix that sums up Moore's thoughts on the Ripper murders, the theory, Ripperology, the origins of the theory, the failings of trying to know things at all. In that, he and Campbell sometimes play a trick of repeating panels to illustrate their points with different characters subbed in the key roles. There will be one where Gull, who we've been following all along as the murderer, is performing some act, and then they'll repeat it with some other character who's been tertiary to the story, dropped in, who's the subject of someone else's theory. It is a point that there's something going on that is beyond understanding, and we will never know the answer, and historical forces are at play here, complicated issues of politics and class and power and all the tensions in society are being enacted, and different people could have played those roles. It all depends on what your theory is.
But it is interesting. When you're mentioning the comics at the back, you maybe immediately think to, especially in the first like roughly half of the book, there's some stuff that happens in the back half that Gull's mind state changes some factors, and I'll just leave it at that. But there's this interesting thing that happens in the story where once we kind of figure out what Gull is doing, and he's now hunting down these 4 women who are basically trying to blackmail the crown about this secret baby that exists, right? And there's a whole thing with the baby too, whatever. But there's this moment where we're getting this interspersing between like what is going on at the night, which is, you know, prostitution, murder, et cetera, and then Gull, like at home, dressed up all prim and proper, you know, kissing, I assume, his wife and showing deference to a child, and all of these like incredibly very specific images that are supposed to be contrasting the man we know him as at night, which is this raving conspiratorial religious lunatic who murders people for the crown, versus the sort of prim and proper Victorian gentleman of doctor, high class individual, or at least person who's attained high class, because he doesn't the actual Gull didn't come from high class, but whatever, right? That contrast is I thought very interesting. To me, it felt like on the one hand, it's telling us very clearly, like, if you're to take this whole Ripper murder thing very seriously, the very disturbing thing might be that who the actual Ripper was could very well have been a totally normal person who in all ways you would not suspect, which Gull in reality is not legitimately a person we'd suspect of being the Ripper murderer, and yet this story is presented that way. That to me seemed like really important, I think, visually to convey without directly telling us that here is a prim and proper man of well-educated background, et cetera, who we all know, all of us, is a raving, magic-loving, religious nut job who murders people for the crown, but by day is loving father and all of these things.
Exactly.
It's well done, and it's fudged up.
There are a lot of cool contrasts in this. There's also, in one of the earlier chapters, a contrast just between, I think it might have been Gull, but between one of the sex workers, I think the first to die, her going to bed at night, you know, in sort of the house, and having to be like go to sleep against a wall with the rope tied in front of her.
Yes.
And then like whoever it is in the upper class going to bed in a nice posh house in a big mansion. And from panel to panel, you have this contrast of worlds. And through the interaction of characters, one of the most telling of contrast was just between Gull and his coachman, whose name I forget now, but
Netley.
Yeah. What was it?
Netley,
Gov.
Yeah, I should have known that. Hetley. He talks to him and almost mocks Hetley's ignorance, or the fact that he's uneducated, like constantly, right? Constantly condescending of, you know, he'll say things and at least not sure how to respond and just kind of agrees with Gull. And then Gull gives him a mocking answer. Of course you don't, you're too simple. Right. And so there's that contrast really points to interesting things of like the educated experience, the people in power are not the most human here. He paints a very different picture of the sex workers, those struggling to survive, the ignorant sort of masses. They are far more compassionate and far more human than the monstrous that are above. And even though it's somewhat obvious when Alan Moore is making these contrasts, he's not hitting the audience over the head with it, I don't think. it's kind of just there throughout. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the power is in the aggregate depiction.
Yeah.
And the repeated contrast in different ways over the course of the book really sort of reinforces and emphasizes the message. And, you're right. This isn't a breathtakingly new idea. And it's not something we haven't heard before or seen, but it's done really well. And it's done in an interesting way.
I can't put my finger on what it is that makes it so unique, but yeah.
Well, I'm not sure it's unique, but what it does is lean really well on the strengths of the comics medium. It uses juxtaposition in a number of ways, right? It juxtaposes different elements and narratively and visually, and allows us to draw our own conclusions from the contrast. And that's one definition of comics. Juxtaposed pictorial and other images in deliberate sequence.
That makes sense.
And
it's just new and unique to me from my limited experience.
Well, not everyone does it as well as Moore and Campbell, or with
that's fair,
or with subject matter that is so evocative or serious. Difficult. Yeah. This is tough. We've actually managed to get through a good chunk of this conversation pretty much without grappling with the fact that this book depicts some absolutely astonishing and horrifying levels of violence by men, one man specifically, but by men against women, against impoverished sex workers, and it is genuinely horrifying in places. Not just because there's an evil conspiracy or people with weird religious ideas, but Moore and Campbell do not shy away from depicting that violence in a very direct way that there is nothing. There's nothing hidden about this violence or its impact. It's not coy. It is direct, awful, and
graphic.
It's you need to, if someone needed to take a break during reading this, I would understand. It's a lot, and the murders get more and more horrifying as time goes on, as Gull descends deeper into whatever is going on inside his head. And it's just, by the end, it's just absolutely shocking. There is a reason that after the fifth murder, Fred Aberlin, the Scotland Yard detective, emerges from the crime scene and says that he feels like everything has changed after what he saw in that room.
Yeah.
It's really powerful.
It is very, very uncomfortable, powerful. Those are all words I think we could use. Visceral. And I think to some degree, almost necessary. Because the thing that we've kind of been skirting around one of my favorite and least favorite scenes at the same time, which is this sequence where Gull gives his sort of weird, esoteric, magic, religious rant about all of the architecture in London to Netley, explaining all of the sort of secret symbols and ideas going back to ancient times about how there used to be, mother goddesses and all of these things, and then we now must suppress them all by putting all of these symbols of masculine ideas and reason, etc., in order to suppress women, essentially, women and motherliness and the feminine entirely. And then, of course, builds, a star without the circle, so not quite a pentagram, out of like giving this guy, the poor Netley, all of the coordinates. But right? This image in his mind of like, this is happening, by the way, in the middle of the suffragette movement, right?
Yep.
So women are
The
literally
early-
arguing at this moment for the right to vote, and we're seeing mostly women in positions of where they don't really have full power, with maybe some exception of Queen Victoria, who to some degree is bound by her station. But I don't think I feel terribly bad for her because she is telling people to go to murder sex workers.
Yeah.
So I don't really feel that bad for her at this moment. But what I find so fascinating about that sequence is it took me a minute to figure out what was being said there. Because he just kept like, here's like a Masonic temple symbol, and here's like a monolith and all of these things. And like, look, and isn't this interesting, Netley? And Netley's like, okay, sure. And then eventually we get an answer where it's like, oh, it's this suppression of the feminine. And then he keeps going and going and going and going until you get to the end and you start to realize that Gull is not mad. He has this deep religious conviction that what he is doing is in order to preserve a version of this world that must put men in power. Men must have power over women, period. And we cannot allow women to rise up and also to assert their symbolic power as well. So women must be suppressed, not only quite literally, physically must be suppressed, they must be symbolically suppressed at all levels of society. Yeah. And that is
he has a perverted sense of the holy.
Yes, an incredibly perverted sense of the holy, and it takes misogyny to like a level that it is hard to fathom, because it is so much more than just I hate women, women don't deserve rights. It's like women are inherently dangerous to men and must be suppressed for the good of the masculine and the sun god, which of course is a dude for reasons, even though suns, whatever, could be girls, I guess, if they wanted to, right? And I bring all of that up because it, when you put this in line with the violence, the kind of violence he commits against women's bodies in this is simultaneously that kind of insanity that's sort of implied in what he's imagining, right? It's just sort of this frenetic killing, but it is also very measured and has symbolic force in the way that is, like the very first murder, he literally takes one of the organs out, right? He guts her and takes an organ out. And there is obviously ritual in the way that she must be killed, because he says you must take the Masonic, like, left to right way, which is how they assassinate people, I guess, too. So there's all this symbolic force as a part of that. And so it's very clear that it's not just we must do this religiously. It's also when women get out of line, they must also be destroyed, like violently, physically destroyed.
Yeah.
It's very uncomfortable.
It's
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And to some degree, that gave me more discomfort than the graphicness of it. Partially, it's because I'm, a fan of horror, a fan of slashers. So that aspect, the literal seeing of things, doesn't bother me as much as sort of that casual, ever pervasive sort of aspect of it that's a violence of a non-literal type or direct type was really striking. And it also, I guess, for me, gave me, I don't know what word to use, perspective or insight, but you hear about the Ripper murders. This is a work of fiction. It's based off of a nonfiction book that probably is a bunch of hokum, but Jack the Ripper was very real. The details, the facts of what was done to these women is very real, right? And reading about that and just reading those sort of like an autopsy type report of what was done to those bodies is one thing, but then to connect that to what does that mean for the psychology of the person that did that?
Yeah.
What does this mean if it was symbolic, what it was done, whatever the reasoning was in reality for those murders? What are some possibilities in terms of what that viewpoint was? That is really frightening and difficult and uncomfortable to ponder. Mm-hmm. And this book forces you to think about that in a deeper way than just reading a history of, Jack the Ripper perhaps does. At least that's what it was for me.
Yeah.
In reading this.
I agree. Can I just say a nice thing about the actual Gull? Because he's a real person, by the way. William Gull was in fact a real physician for his time. And there is a note that says that he did advocate for allowing women into the medical field. That is something that he did in real life, which I think becomes very difficult to compare to the Gull we get in this story. Which, when you mentioned, right, this idea that there's the very real stuff. There's lots of very real people and references, and I'm sure lots of things in here that are more or less accurate, true things. And then there are all of the ways in which they've sort of twisted the truth just a little bit for this version of the story, which is another thing that must be a wild experience to try to go through this and map it against reality and see where the divergence points are and start thinking about the logic of them. Because there is, as Stephen pointed out at the very beginning, this very elaborate conspiracy, and the story itself that we get is also incredibly elaborate in its details. So much so that I know I missed like 7,000 of them already.
Oh, for sure. Well, we all did. I did. This isn't my first time reading it, and I did. I want to add, Shaun, based on what you were saying about the historical Dr. Gull. It's not in this collected version that I read and that you read, and or that is most widely available today. But when From Hell was originally being published sequentially, in the last volume, Eddie Campbell got to have his say briefly in text. He wrote a little bit of comment of his own on the narrative that he'd just been taking part of. And he said, many of you have asked me what I think of this. I don't think he did it. And he essentially said, and I'm paraphrasing greatly, that the real Dr. Gull was a great man, and this was just a bunch of little people throwing stones at him when he was dead and couldn't fight back. Which I thought was... By the way, remember, this is a crock.
Yeah.
So, it's important. It's important to remember that liberties were taken.
I do think that's super important, though, because if you... so much of how we even talk about the base subject of the story, that Jack the Ripper murders, is mythologized already. Yes. And so trying to make this story, to take this story at face value as it's not advertised to us as a historical narrative. It is set in a point in history, but it is not itself a historical narrative. And so that would be something I would really caution anyone from doing, is don't come to this looking for the true story. You are getting a sort of almost alternate history reinterpretation of the past that is itself really it's more metaphorical than it is literal in that respect.
But it also, more makes really clear, I would say, particularly in those appendices, the footnotes, what here is absolute fact, what here is interpretation, what is extrapolation, what is complete fiction.
Yeah.
He's fairly good at making it clear, because it is very historical in some regards, but ultimately in other details, it's completely unknowable. As Stephen said.
There's
Stephen. Oh, go ahead.
No, thanks. There's the epilogue as opposed to the appendices, where two of the characters who survived to later in history are together and reflecting on their experiences, and they're in a graveyard reflecting and talking about what happened now years in their past. And it's you know what, they're right in the introduction, so I'll just say it. It's Aberlin and Lees. And Aberlin says, it's all just stories when all's said and done. And Lees replies, but that's just the thing. It isn't just stories. Those women really died. And later on, they're talking about how this huge, complex thing that they only know the sort of the fringes of, but enough of the truth to know that they can never, really speak about it. And Aberlin says, it makes you wonder how much of the world is true. And I think that's more warning us.
Yes.
Yeah. It is.
Both those things are more warning us, and also grappling with his own feelings about what he's doing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's...
So speaking of taking liberties, before we end or wrap up on anything here, I do want to bring up the movie.
Oh, God. I never saw it.
Oh, no.
So you've never seen it? Okay.
Never saw it.
I saw the movie back when it originally came out, before I even really knew what it was based on or anything. And so I found this a really interesting experience of reading just how wonderful this is in comparison to the movie that's so watered down, taken just to the plot, and is missing all the nuance and all of the I mean, it's been a while since I've watched this, so maybe I'm remembering the movie more harshly than it actually is. But Shaun, you've seen the film, correct?
No, I'm good.
No, you haven't?
I don't plan to.
Have we?
Yeah,
Have we?
I'm
have
kind
we
of
just found
curious
a new,
to watch it again now.
Have we just found a new torture choice?
Yeah, we might have to do that.
Yeah.
Although, has
there
Torture
any-
done League of Extraordinary Gentlemen? Because that I've heard is very bad as well.
Done. My question because there are supernatural elements to the graphic novel, but does the film maintain those?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Then I don't know that
It's pretty much,
technically qualifies.
as I recall, it's pretty much set up as a straightforward plot with the conspiracy theory and a by the numbers kind of like crime story.
This is like the problem of adapting more in general, right? It's almost nothing you can't really adapt more. It's sort of like how they adapt Philip K. Dick, where they just take the concept and then that's what they use. Because if you tried to actually adapt Philip K. Dick's novels, just as if you adapt, like, I don't know, actual Watchmen, it looks bananas, I would imagine, on screen. Yeah. It works in the comic form, I think, precisely because the comic form, like, you can manipulate the space and time, etc., in a way that I think comic readers or graphic novel readers aren't put off by. But if you create that in a film space, it just becomes disjointed and confusing.
The film could have at least brought in some of the themes a little more strongly.
Well, yeah, they could have done that. No.
In any case, maybe we will need to have that for a torture.
Maybe one day.
That is, we haven't done that as a torture theme of just adaptations of Alan Moore, because there should be enough out there in terms of bad adaptations to make a poll.
He's notoriously said he hates Hollywood, basically, because they destroy his productions. So
yeah, he's not a fan. Although he's perfectly happy for his collaborators to get a check. He's pretty decent about that.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think the best Moore is still probably Watchmen in terms of adaptation.
In terms of adaptations?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't see that either.
Oh, well, it's good. The TV show is not the same story at all, but is also very good. So,
what is your opinion, Stephen, of I've heard there's a sequel to Watchmen, the graphic
Watchmen
novel. No, I thought it was called something else.
There was a prequel series, and they've done various things with the characters. So I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of Moore's relationship with his publishers.
Oh, Doomsday Clock. That was the one I was thinking.
Oh, yeah, Doomsday Clock. Yeah, they brought them into the DC universe, and it's just... There were some very good creators involved with both the prequels and with Doomsday Clock, but I will never read those because they were bad. Creatively, it was a bad idea, but also ethically, it was a real abuse of Moore and a good faith agreement he made with his publisher many years ago that they more or less completely disrespected and have done for 40 years.
Oh, yeah, he wasn't even involved in it much.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
no.
not at all.
He
I thought he wrote it or something.
He will not even take the money.
Ah.
That's how mad he is. Yeah, but that's a longer story than we have time for right now.
Yes, for another time.
Yeah, for another time. So there was a question in chat, and I said in chat that I would make sure that we answered it, and that would be the question of why did we end up with this particular work? So why?
Yeah, so we were talking about another graphic novel we could have as a subject of Reading Rangers, and I had gotten interested in an acclaimed Argentine science fiction comic called The Eternaut, or Eternaut. I don't know how you pronounce it. Eternaut, which is apparently which came to my attention because I'd never heard of it because it had a recent Netflix adaptation. And people were doing that thing that often happens of saying, look, quality of the adaptation aside, this should really tell you to go and read this work. So I thought, maybe we should do that. It turns out that unfortunately, this seminal work of Argentine comics, which exists in two different versions, one from the 50s, one from the 60s, is not easy to find in either version. It's very difficult to get a hold of. I had trouble finding any but electronic copies via my library. It didn't seem to be in stock in most places. It was hard to track down. And I knew that if I was having trouble, that, listen, I'm trying not to be smug about this, but Toronto has amazing comic book stores, amazing science fiction bookstores, and one of the best public library systems in North America. If I was having trouble finding it, other people were going to too. So we looked for other options. And I thought, well, you know what's sure to be available and easy to find? Major graphic novels by Alan Moore. So I suggested a few different ones, and we sort of narrowed it down to From Hell. But they weren't easy to find. I was really surprised.
Not as easy as you think.
I was shocked that the local comic shops here in Buffalo did not have From Hell in stock, because I was originally just going to go buy a copy of my own. Mm-hmm. Luckily, my university did have it in the library, and so I was able to get the library copy to read. But yeah, all the ones that Stephen had originally suggested, I was just trying to, can I just support my local store and get that? And nope, not there.
Yeah,
it wasn't.
Which I was surprised about. But the idea was last time we had done a modern day, more recent graphic novel, and so this time around, I think we had said maybe we could do something classic, particularly since some of this sprang out of my conversations of I didn't have much experience reading graphic novels.
Yes,
and so
true.
I had talked to Stephen about, hey, introduce me, convince me that it's worth reading these. And so he's already succeeded. I mean, the first one, I didn't make the episode, I don't think. I think I was sick or got otherwise busy.
Oh, boy.
But I had read it, and it was one of the best things I've ever read.
The Deep Dark?
So
yes. Fantastic
immediately after that, I was like, okay, I want to read more of these now.
Yay!
Daniel, if I had known when I went... So you sent me the options, and then I just went... I literally decided from those options. So the reason we end up with From Hell was
you
my
own it.
fault. And I was like, I own one of those already, so we'll just go with that one. Because I was like, I don't have the brain power to figure out where to find books at this point. which isn't that hard. I get it. But right. So I was just like, I own From Hell, and I know that because this darn thing, which you all have seen, right, is all warped because it was in my backpack and got wet like a week after I bought it, fresh, brand new. So I remember its shape. And so I was like, cool, we'll do that one. If you had prefaced that by saying, by the way, I've only read like 2 graphic novels in my life, so maybe think a little bit about these, I may not have chosen this one. I might have gone with one of the others because I like From Hell. I think it's a very interesting book. I like Alan Moore in general. I think he's one of the greatest graphic novel creators ever. But this is not where I would have sent you, Daniel. This is intense.
That's all right.
So next time we will just read some Hello Kitty.
Oh, God.
Actually, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles would be great.
That would be fun. Yeah.
Oh, but which iteration? The original black and white comics?
Yeah. The original.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you mean okay? No, I get what you mean.
What other
Black and White
iteration is there
really
other than
good.
like playing off of the kids version?
Oh no,
for
Daniel.
kids.
Oh gosh, no. No. That is not the origin of the Teenage Mutant Ninja. Okay, we got to do the turtles, Sean. We got to do the turtles. There's
Daniel,
a lot.
I know the kids version is not the origin of them, but I mean, other than the original comics and then them turning it into a kiddie version,
which was then spun back into comics. But there have been subsequent multiple iterations, drawing to one degree or another on the different sources.
Oh,
yeah.
There's a lot of turtles. It's turtles all the way down.
I suspect we'd have to go with the Mirage Studios era.
Yeah, the originals, yeah.
Yeah, which would have been the ones I had when I was younger, but I think I had when they did color editions of those.
The larger format albums or
they're like books. They're almost like this size, but not this thick.
But I know exactly the editions you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's where you would have to go because I don't know, the artwork is just there's a reason why I was a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fan as a kid. I had these as kids. They are not for kids, by the way. But I had them. Oh man, they were so good.
Kids got to learn.
But we can still get them, right? They probably had an omnibus edition somewhere, right?
I'm sure there is somewhere. We'd have to look into it.
Okay, we're doing that.
Yeah.
We're doing that. That's the next one.
All right.
Because Eastman and Laird, I think this would be a lot of fun. And also, I am waiting, you little bastards at Palladium. I am waiting for my freaking TMNT edition. I don't care about no tariffs. You send that shit to me now.
What are you talking about tariffs? They're American.
Right, but they're probably shipping them from out of country.
Oh, from China or something, yeah. Printed in China.
Well,
That's true. Everything's printed in China.
Yeah, who knows?
Fair
but
enough.
Anyway, sorry. That's not me being really mad at Palladium. I'm not actually mad at you. I get it. But also, I really want my book, so hurry up. Yeah. I want to play the game, damn it. Because the only other option is After the Bomb, which is not the same thing.
It's not.
But also, we could play that. But anyway, I think we need to close out the show.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah. So, folks, that is the show. If you'd like to let us know what you thought, if you've read From Hell, for example, and you have thoughts about it, email skiffyandfanty@gmail.com, or if you are in on the Patreon Discord, you can go to the Discord channel. There's a show discussions channel in there that you can talk about the show, or you can go to the book channel like us and talk about this book if you've read it. We are on Blue Sky, Threads, Mastodon, YouTube, and a bunch of other places. Those links are at skiffyandfanty.com/skiffythings. We are live every Friday at 7 p.m. Central on Twitch for our live show. That is at twitch.tv/alphabetstreams. And then if you like what we do, give us all of your money that you don't need for food or legal fees, and then spread the word about us and leave us reviews. And then the place to give us all of your money is patreon.com/skiffyandfanty. Yeah. And so with that, we're going to say thanks to our Patreon supporters. That includes Andrew the Alluring, Cameron the Chthonic, Caroline the Benevolent, Carrie the Divine, Chris the Candescent, Dan the Transient, Daniel the Cultured, David the Debonair, JC the Jocular, Jeff the Gracious,
Joseph the Jovial, Juan the Junctional, KB the Kind, Karen the Kick-Ass, Kat the Kinematic, Matthew the Magnificent, Paul the Pious, Phoebe the Eloquent, Robert the Riveting, Robin the Bold, Ryan the Resilient,
Sarah A. the Sensational, Sarah E. the Sublime, Sarah O. the Rapturous, Scott the Gentleman, Stephen the Strange, Terry the Thorough, Tanya the Triumphant, Trish the Imperturbable, and Victor the Valiant.
Thanks all our supporters. We appreciate you. So if you'd like to find me, I'm at ShaunDuke.net. I am Alphabet Streams on this Twitch channel every Wednesday and Sunday at 6 p.m. Central. And then if you just want to find my socials and other kinds of links and projects, ShaunDuke.net/DukeThings.
I'm Stephen Geigen-Miller, and you can find me on Blue Sky at stephengm.bsky.social. Stephen is spelt with a PH, as is correct and proper. And I write comics and graphic novel reviews for Skiffy and Fanty.
You can find me, Daniel, on the Skiffy and Fanty blog and at reading1000lives.com or as Reading 1000 Lives on Blue Sky.
Well, perfect. As required by the Skiffy and Fanty bylaws, I must make this happy, which is going to be a challenge because this book ain't a happy book. And so I will just say that I will do this. I got from my library a Jean-Paul Sartre book, which is Existentialism is Humanism. And I don't know why I'm thinking about that, but I just want to mess with your brain. So I'm going to give you just the opening line of this book for you all to think about for your homework. You ready?
En français.
Hold on. I'm not doing it in French. All right. My purpose here is to defend existentialism against some charges that have been brought against it. That's it.
Makes you think.
Makes you think. What charges is he talking about? That's going to be in the next paragraph. You'll have to get the book to read it. I saw it in the library and it sounded interesting, and I know it's Sartre. So anyway, there you go. So on that note, happy ending and scene.